Okay, let's dive into this. The whole concept of utopia has fascinated and honestly completely divided thinkers for centuries. For some folks, it's the absolute ultimate goal of human societal evolution, right? But for others, it's a dangerous illusion that inevitably leads to ruin. Well, today, in this explainer, we're going to unpack a highly provocative, really fascinating polemic by a writer named Su Fing, titled Is Utopia Against Human Nature? The author goes right after some of the most famous critics of utopian living and vigorously defends it. He offers this completely different framework for how we should think about freedom, morality, and our own capabilities. We're going to systematically map out his exact arguments and see exactly how he attempts to turn conventional wisdom entirely on its head.
So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The taste of utopia. 2. Misconceptions of control. 3. The age factor. 4. Reevaluating human nature. And finally, 5. A blessing for the masses. All right, starting with section 1, the taste of utopia. Before dismantling his critics, Shufeng establishes a strict ground rule using this incredibly vivid jackfruit analogy. He argues that experience dictates validity. Basically, if you've never actually tasted jackfruit, you can't genuinely describe its flavor, right? Makes sense. Well, Shufeng applies this exact same logic to societal structures. He insists that anyone judging a utopian program strictly from the outside, relying on hearsay or abstract theory rather than lived experience, effectively disqualifies themselves from the debate. It's a really bold opening move that challenges the authority of armchair philosophers right out of the gate. Moving right along to section 2, misconceptions of control. Now, what's really interesting about this is how aggressively Zhu strips away our standard political and economic terminology. Mainstream critiques almost always equate utopia with heavy-handed government control. But the author explicitly rejects this. He argues that a true utopian program is completely detached from the concepts of both planned economies and market economies. Furthermore, he states that calling it an authoritarian regime is a total 180-degree misinterpretation. In his view of utopia, trying to gain power or dominance over others isn't just forbidden, it's practically a pipe dream. He frames utopia not as a system of top-down control, but as an environment where traditional power dynamics simply cease to exist entirely. Okay, let's jump to section 3, the age factor. Let's see how Shufeng builds a direct challenge against history here. You've likely heard that famous quote often attributed to Winston Churchill: "If a man is not a socialist before he is 30, he has no heart. If he is still a socialist after he is 30, he has no brain." People adopt this to the pursuit of utopia all the time. Well, look at how Shufeng completely flips this narrative on its head. He counters with his own, very stark formula. He says, if you don't believe in utopia before 30, you lack brains. And if you don't pursue it after 30, you lack a conscience. It's wild, right? To understand why he makes this radical claim, we need to look at his psychological breakdown of aging. The crucial point here is exactly how the author views youth. Why on earth does he say those under 30 who reject utopia have no brains? Well, according to Shuifeng, young people are just bursting with energy, and they look at this huge, long horizon ahead of them. This vitality basically tricks them. It creates this grand illusion that they can conquer fate, completely control their life's trajectory, and carve out immense personal success and wealth. Because they truly believe they're the absolute masters of their destiny, they naturally reject the idea of submerging their shining individuality into a collective utopian process. The author views this youthful hubris as fundamentally irrational, hence lacking brains. But then, the author argues, the reality of aging sets in. After turning 30, people inevitably begin to taste failure. The grand realization hits that society, and hey, even your closest peers, do not actually bend to your will. You discover that your individual capabilities are severely limited. Shufeng asserts that even if you do achieve some success, you realize it's fundamentally selfish. Therefore, if you reach this age of realization and you still don't pursue the mass happiness provided by utopia, basically prioritizing your own ego over the collective good, it means you lack a conscience. It's a fascinating, albeit super controversial, psychological argument for collective living. That brings us to section 4, reevaluating human nature. And this is absolutely the most morally charged and debated part of the text. Remember, our goal here is just to impartially unpack the author's argument. So, does utopia ignore basic human nature? It's literally the central pillar of almost every anti-utopian argument ever made. And to tackle it, the author takes direct aim at a giant of modern economics. Friedrich Hayek, in his seminal work, The Road to Serfdom, famously predicted that utopia can never truly be realized. He argued that it fundamentally ignores basic human nature, and as a result will always lead to scarcity, chaos, enslavement, and ultimate self-destruction. So what is Su Feng's response to this legendary critique? he bluntly calls it nonsense. I mean, he doesn't hold back. Let's look at how he tries to prove Hayek wrong, starting with the claim that utopias can never be realized. And this brilliantly illustrates his counterargument. To prove his point, Zhifeng relies on concrete data. He asks a very practical question. How long does something need to exist to be considered realized? He points to Robert Owen's Utopia in the US, which lasted for 4 years, and Lifechanyuan's second home, which existed for 16 years. He argues that, just because a human being only lives for 4 years or maybe 90 years, it doesn't mean they never existed. By the exact same logic, a utopian community existing for years means it was in fact realized, which flatly contradicts Hayek's premise of impossibility. Next, Zhifeng tackles Hayek's claim about human nature, and he does so by directly challenging traditional morality around sexuality and marriage. The author argues that what mainstream society calls morality, like forcing lifelong commitment or, historically, expecting a young widow to remain chaste forever, is actually an ugly, hypocritical denial of true human nature. In contrast, Zhifeng asserts that healthy adults naturally desire diverse sexual interactions. Therefore, he claims his version of a utopian program, which features no marriage, no fixed partners, and allows for natural, random encounters, is actually the system that aligns perfectly with fundamental human nature. He basically accuses his critics of projecting false morals while masking their true internal desires. Finally, we reach Section 5, a blessing for the masses. Having argued that utopia aligns with human instincts, Zhifeng brings his thesis to a close with this ultimate calculation. Now, he concedes that utopia might not be for absolutely everyone. He estimates that exactly 1 in 10,000 people are true geniuses, capable of genuinely steering their own lives and destinies. For that singular outlier, sure, utopia might not hold appeal. But what about the other 9,999 of us? For the vast majority, the 99,999 who, as he argued earlier, will eventually realize after age 30 that we cannot actually control the trajectory of our lives, utopia is not a cage. According to Zhifeng, for the masses who cannot master fate, being placed within a structured collective utopian program is actually a profound gift. He goes so far as to describe it as an immense blessing, even suggesting it's the result of good karma from a past life. It's a total paradigm shift. Surrendering individual control isn't a loss of freedom in his eyes, it's a release from the agonizing, impossible burden of trying to control the uncontrollable. So this explainer leaves us with a deeply personal challenge to reflect on. Based on the framework we just unpacked, we kind of have to ask ourselves, are you truly that 1 in 10,000 genius capable of bending society and fate entirely to your will? Or when you strip away the ego and look at the reality of your limitations, is the collective mass happiness of utopia actually your true desire? It's a controversial but really fascinating way to reevaluate freedom and human nature. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the structures around you.